Welcome to the Do Good Work podcast. Today we have Justin Welsh. Over the last decade, Justin has helped build two $50 million annual recurring revenue companies and raised over $300 million in venture capital. But in 2019, he burnt out and walked away from a high-paying executive job and a fast-growing startup in Los Angeles to work for himself. He redesigned his life to live with more intention. So he and his wife moved from LA to Nashville and built their online businesses where they use active income to create passive income and use that passive income to invest in the future. He fuels his growth by his LinkedIn operating system, which he uses to create and has created over 100,000 followers on LinkedIn and has generated over $1 million in self-employed income, all with zero in advertising, which is phenomenal. He also runs the audience and income private LinkedIn creator community and advises multiple SaaS companies, mentors entrepreneurs in the 500 startup ecosystem from Mexico, Peru, Argentina, Chile, and Ecuador. And he's an LP at a GTM fund that invests $4 million a year into early stage companies specializing in B2B SaaS. Hope you enjoy our conversation here with Justin. Justin, welcome.
Raul, it's great to be here, man. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Justin, when I look at the creator economy, I feel like we're back in 2012-ish, back when people went to this space because they got fired from their jobs, back with Pat Flynn started the podcast and stuff like that. So I've been seeing we're kind of in that scene, but people are voluntarily leaving corporate gigs, leaving big high pay gigs for more flexible lifestyles in the creator economy. But can you just give us a wrap of what are you seeing right now as a creator and what is the creator economy?
Yeah, I think the creator economy is just the way of the world being able to support individuals who want to go out and build a business around themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think there's so much, it's so easy to get into the game right now because you need an internet connection, a keyboard, and some thoughts. And that is enough to get into the creator economy. And what I see is that it's a lot like the labor shortage, right? We're struggling with folks in the restaurant industry, restaurants not being able to staff up. It's because people have choices. And COVID forced us to all take a look at our lifestyle and make choices. And if someone leaves a really high paying 9-to-5 to become a creator, can they guarantee that they'll backfill their overall total earnings? No. But if they can get 60% or 70% of the way there and have no boss and total flexibility, I think what I'm seeing is a lot of people are choosing that. They're choosing to make less, spend less, and instead acquire more flexibility and acquire, more freedom in their lives. That's what I'm seeing, at least in my group. I have a private Discord community that I run. That's the stories that I'm hearing from people. So hopefully that kind of resonates.
No, I think that's important because there's like the twofold of that sentence, right? The first side is I'm a creator, I want to leave and I want to start looking at this path as a career. Or on the other side is I'm an employer and I have either contractors or employees who I know are doing a side hustle. I remember before the pandemic, we were at a lunch or a dinner, and one of the HR reps was saying like about the end of next year, 2020, around 50% of the economy is going to have a side gig. So it's expected, if you're listening to this, your employees right now either have a side business, a side gig, or a job that they're doing on top of what they're doing with you. So it's a good eye opener to be able to provide flexibility not only for your team, but also expect this is more normal than it was, 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just curious because when it comes to, let's say we're creating this as a career path and you mentioned that you just need thoughts in a keyboard, it's a little bit more than that because I know your big premise is around building the audience, serving the audience, and then building products for that audience. How do you mesh both based on your experience, with, softwares, with startups, and making something that's valuable to the marketplace?
Yeah, it's interesting because, right, I think that was a simplified version, sure, of what I said, but it's true. You really just need an internet connection, a keyboard, and some thoughts. Now, it doesn't mean you'll make money the next day, but those are the necessary tools. And if your thoughts are strong enough, if you know enough about a particular topic, then you can unlock income from an audience. And the way that I think about it is everyone has something to share. Expertise is linear. And the biggest problem that I see people, at least when I talk to people, is they say things like, I'm not an expert in anything. I don't know anything well enough to teach other people. None of that is true.
Mhm.
None of it. Where expertise is totally linear. For example, I built a sales team from 0 to 50 million in recurring revenue. It's a pretty good accomplishment. But if I look at Mark Roberge at HubSpot, he did 100 million. If I look at other people in bigger companies, they did 250, 500. If I had never started my consulting or advising business in the SaaS space, should I have said those guys are better experts than me, so I should never get started? No, of course not. Like, I built a business for folks that are at 1 million, 5 million, and 10 million. And so that's how I think about expertise. So what I always recommend people do is they sit down and think, who was I 2 years ago? Right. And what was the information that I needed 2 years ago that if I would have been given right away, I could have avoided expensive mistakes, accelerated my career, landed a better job, done something that, better. Those are the things that you should be teaching your audience. It's a journey. And I think that you should be bringing your audience along on that journey. The second thing that I'll say that is really important in the balance perspective is I look at people's content online, and one day it's talking to their core audience. The next day it's like, look at my kids. And then the next day it's like, happy Father's Day. And the next day is their favorite recipe. And then it's back to the core audience. If you look at my content, every day I put out a piece of content that is helpful to my core audience. That's my goal. And so audience building is really nothing much more than providing helpful advice on a very routine basis to a very specific ideal customer profile. And so I pulled that from SaaS, from my previous life in the SaaS space. And so that's I guess, step one of the recipe.
More like discipline, right? Just focusing on what is that core audience, and then disciplining on focusing, providing the most value. And I like that framework. And for our listeners, I want to make sure that you note that if you're going out in this space and you're wanting to create something for an audience, looking at where was I 2 years ago and what are the pitfalls, I think that's very valuable, because not even for content that you produce, but even for products that you can help create in the marketplace, if you can help someone create a shortcut and save, let's say 6 months to a year of time, that is extremely valuable, because it's something they cannot get back. So it's a good frame or mental model to identify, where was I 2 years ago? Who is that person? How do I serve them at the highest value, not only with content, but also potentially looking at different offerings or services that I can do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's called leading your audience, right? The other two things that you can do is you can discover on behalf of your audience, and you can report to your audience. So if you have literally zero experience, or you want to talk about something in which you have zero experience, you can go out and aggregate content from other people who do have experience and share that content with your audience as though you've discovered it. The other thing that you can do is you can report, and a reporter is an interviewer, right? The reporters you see on TV, they might know a lot about the subjects that they're talking about, but the way that they bring us information is by interviewing people who are subject matter experts. And you can do that on social media. You can interview people and post on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and you can build a following simply by being a reporter. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can build your audience following, but the most common one is to lead, the folks who are a few years behind you on the journey.
That's really important to identify those three personas that you can take on, and identify what can I do for the audience based on that persona that I choose to, or character that I choose to become. I want to flip the script a little bit, and you have experience, helping 500 startups with your own private investments. And I'm curious, when you're looking at startups that are growing, like I know you're looking at the Latin America startups, and that's the space that you focus on. What are some of the things and trends that you're seeing there, and what excites you most about that?
Yeah, I mean, I stick pretty specific to things that are really close to where I've played. And so most of what I do and mentor and look at are healthcare technology. To me, healthcare, while extremely problematic in the United States, is problematic everywhere. Access to good healthcare and good doctors in good time is a problem. And so I look at companies that are doing a few things, trying to make the healthcare experience more expedient. So being able to see the right type of provider as fast as possible and as conveniently as possible. So I'm looking at things like technology that fills, canceled appointments. I'm looking at, telehealth as technology, anything that makes that experience more expedient. And then the second thing I like to look at is anything that improves the quality of that experience. So, not just did I like my doctor, but like, my outcomes the right outcomes? Am I getting healthier? Am I reaching whatever outcome the doctor set for me? And so that's a
Wow.
lot of what I mentor. I don't do a lot of investing through 500 startups. I mostly invest through, I'm an LP at a rolling fund called a GTM fund, which invests 4 million in early stage B2B startups. And I kind of put my money in and let the guys who are a lot smarter than me make the choices. And so that's how I actually picked that fund, is because Max Altschuler, the GP who runs it, is someone I have a lot of trust in. And so that's how I think about investing, is I put the money in and give it to people who are much smarter than I am.
That's exciting to be able to produce, the future startups. And even like if 100 fail and one hits it, like that's value not only for you, but also value for the marketplace. And it's that focus as well with healthcare, is the GTM.
Yeah, it does. It touches healthcare sometimes, much less frequently than other funds like Leering Transformation Partners is a fund that goes really deep into healthcare, things like that. But no, for me, it's mostly the way that I think about it being an LP at their fund is I want to make investments in startups, and to me, the most important thing is deal flow. So who can get the best deals earliest and get access to those deals and invest along big titans of the industry like Andreessen Horowitz and things like that, right? Max is very well connected. He's put together a great group of former operators like myself. And so we bring something really unique to the table, which is we're a bunch of operators. We've built businesses,
Done it.
as contributors. And so rather than have a healthcare specific focus, I just put my trust directly in Max, because I think he's a smart guy and he understands what companies are most likely to make the biggest impact.
I appreciate you sharing that. I like to know how people think around their investments and what they look at. And deal flow is obviously one of the key terms that I hear around. Flipping on social, I remember back in the day where Twitter, you can connect with anyone. You still can, but like even influencers in different industries when you're a nobody. And you kind of leverage that with LinkedIn. And I know LinkedIn right now is still a black box from my opinion. And I've been in it since, I don't know, I think 10 years now. It's still a black box for a lot of different people, because a lot of you that people say you just post content, hope they come. You do ad media buying, but ads are like $15, $25 a lead, 50 if you're lucky, depending on like your industry. I know that it's not just one thing that helps LinkedIn accelerate your brand, but why do you placed you're going all in on LinkedIn, saying that this is where you should go to build a personal brand? Like, what does LinkedIn have to offer in your perspective?
Yeah, it's an empty space of creators. So like Twitter is jammed with creators. Twitter, everyone's creating on Twitter, right? You've got marketing Twitter, money Twitter, crypto Twitter. Everyone's got a personal brand on Twitter. LinkedIn is wide open. Like nobody treats LinkedIn like Twitter except for me. and I'm not trying to say that in like an arrogant way, but I don't have a boss. So I don't worry about what I write. And, in a sea of boring resumes,
because that's how it started.
White papers. Yeah. White papers, case studies, look at me, I got a new job. All that stuff is boring. And LinkedIn is making a pivot towards the creator with creator mode. They're standing up an internal creator team. And so 3 years ago, I looked at the space and said, or the platform, and said, like, there's no one writing anything interesting here. And so I decided to try and treat it like social media, which is, I'm there every day. I share strong opinions. I'm relatively, polarizing, for lack of a better description. Certainly not mean or divisive or ever, but I share things I believe strongly in. And that does a good job of getting reactions. And when I get reactions, I participate in the conversation. So I participate for 1 hour every morning from 7:15 Central to 8:15 Central. And I engage with my audience. And that has done a few things. It's made me one of the very few creators who actually like talks with their audience every single day for a long time. Number one. And then number two, it's introduced me, much like folks do on Twitter, to a network of really cool people. So, I've met guys like Chris Walker. I've met Jackie Hermes. Like I've met Austin Belsack all through Twitter, or all through LinkedIn. And I didn't know any of those people. And, I still haven't met a lot of them in person. I ran a sales show with Scott Leese for like 6 months on on LinkedIn called Thursday Night Sales. I've never met Scott.
Oh,
So like, I mean, I talked to him on the phone, like we text and things like that, but I've never met him.
yeah.
And so, I treat LinkedIn like that. My goal is to network effectively because, it's about who you know.
It's the human element that I think that you're leveraging again from LinkedIn, putting your flag in the sand and making sure that your message is clear and even creates a diversion between those who may not agree with you, those who are fanatics about what you're saying. But on top of that, I think that we're moving away. I know automation in MarTech is huge, but even like moving away from just having my automated posts or automated things just happening and I don't engage zero with my audience. Now it's like I have to invest my time with this audience and my time, giving and contributing. And I think we're moving back to the human element where we're inundated with like all those scheduled posts and no human interaction to now scheduling an hour, which is valuable for you to schedule time, but to build that audience and to grow, which I think is important for our audience to know as well, is that what is your strategy when you're looking at LinkedIn or any social media platform? How are you actually engaging and adding value and adding to the conversation, not just starting the conversation?
Mm-hmm. My goal every morning is to spend that hour. And generally my average post is seen by about 111,000 people a day. And so it's like speaking to a stadium every day.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just write something and then you disappear, the likelihood that you gain that sort of traction is just significantly decreased. And so I'm a guy who thinks a lot about odds. I just try and increase my odds all the time. And so if spending an hour of my time means, twice as many people will see it, can I tether that directly to a income or cost or, price? Not really. But for today, like I wrote a post where instead of giving advice, I asked some people for something. I asked people to buy a course of mine today.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have the 80-20 give ask rule. Give 80% of the time, 20% of the time, ask for something. And when I ask for something, the audience obliges because I don't do it all that often. And so at that point in time, like a day like today, I can write a post and make money. And so that is the goal of one of the goals of building this audience: make money, create a better network, meet cool people, help people succeed. You do those things, like it's a very vicious cycle.
And I do want to touch on that because it sounds like you have like, if you read any of Jim Collins' work, which I'm sure you have, like the 20-mile march, the daily activities or the weekly activities you have to do to produce an outcome. And this is like the discipline, like the one action. And it sounds like you have that already mapped out for what you do on LinkedIn, and you're teaching that in your course. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I have like a very specific daily, weekly, and monthly things that I do. Because if you just go tactically, if you just get into the weeds and just like, I know people who wake up each morning and like 15 minutes before they want to create content, they're trying to think of what to do. And that's where you get stuff that's irrelevant. And so I'm systematized. I bring that from my previous, venture running sales at a venture-backed startup. And so, every Saturday and Sunday, I have certain hours that I create. Every Monday through Friday for an hour to an hour and a half in the morning, I write. So I write longer form stuff. I make specific asks on specific days. I post at the exact same time every morning. And I also now post at midnight to catch the European and the Indian market. And so that's all really systematized. And then in the morning from 7:15 to 8:15, I have a system of what I go through all the time. And that's just what I call my operating system. And that's why I decided to, put it into this course, the LinkedIn operating system, and provide it to folks, because it's not rocket science by any means, but it's also not easy to think through all the different pieces. And so I felt like if I put it all into one place where people could just do the same thing that I was doing, like it's not a zero-sum game. Like there's plenty of room for everyone here. Everyone can create, everyone can go out and build their audience, and so I'd like to be the guy that helps accelerate that for people that want to do that. And yeah, so that's how I think about, building my courses and offering the things that I'm, trying to help people with.
Oh, that's exciting. And just so the audience knows, like there is no kickback here. I just really do trust Justin with what he produces with the content. I've been through one of his previous courses, and I can tell you that it's like $10,000 underpriced. So
yeah, that's part of my strategy is like, is people are always like, oh, it's the same amount of effort to sell $1,000 courses as it is to sell $100 course. And that's true, but that doesn't capture all the benefits of pricing your stuff affordably. You know,
Yeah.
if you price your things affordably, you get much greater word of mouth because the perceived value at the cost is much higher. And then
Yep.
you got 10 people talking about your course instead of one person. And I mean, I created my first course, the LinkedIn Playbook, 18 months ago.
Hmm.
I just shut it down. That was selling still like $1,000 a week
Oh,
just on word of mouth and with no promotion. And so I assume that the LinkedIn operating system, which will be much more robust and much more up to date, will likely do the same.
it's exciting to continue to find that audience and continue to add value as you evolve and as you grow. One last question, and Justin, you don't have to answer this if you don't feel like, but what's like the end goal? Like what are you're doing the advising for startups, you're investing in, having deal flow, you're creating in the creator economy. What's the next step? What are you seeing happening, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, like I'll never be satisfied with doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's just not like the kind of person that I am. But I think one thing that I would like to do is have carte blanche to do whatever I want to do all day long without any um, need to earn income.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would love to just work on whatever I want with no pressure to earn. And so I've been in the startup game for a while. Was pretty lucky to have a few interesting exits, like that, which allowed me to continue to be a creator. My goal is to put enough money in the bank and help enough people to where I can do whatever I want and charge nothing for it. Like that would be pretty cool. And I think overall, like to build out enough streams of income that are as automated as possible. I'm an advisor that requires time for money. I do coaching, that's time for money. My
Mm-hmm.
digital courses have an upfront investment of time, but they pay money over the long haul.
Mm-hmm.
My wife, who just walked by, manages all of our wealth and dividends and things like that. That's more passive, like just trying to create as much income with as little effort as possible,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can reach a place where we don't have to work as hard if we don't want to. And
Mm-hmm.
if we do and it doesn't work, there's no pressure there. So that's like my long-winded answer of saying I want to retire.
But you said it without wanting to retire, because I think there's a bug that a lot of entrepreneurs have, and I feel it too. Like I never want to retire, but I also never want to be like stinging on that paycheck to paycheck, et cetera. So it's interesting to see that diversification. I appreciate you answering that. But
Sure.
as we close off, Justin, is there one tip that you would recommend the audience before we close the podcast?
Yeah, one tip. I would say the number one thing that I would say to people is, who are you creating for? And I asked this question on LinkedIn the other day. I said, describe your business in one sentence in this way: I help who do what through how. 60% of the people who answered the question said, I help people or I help companies.
Hmm.
If you help people or companies, you help nobody.
Mm-hmm.
You have to help specific people or specific types of companies. People write back and say, like, I help salespeople do X. What kind of salespeople? Beginners, salespeople with 20 years experience, enterprise, SMB, technology, healthcare. Who do you help? And so I would say the number one thing I recommend before I go on a diatribe is, like, know your ideal customer. Like, get down to a place where you own a really good sub niche.
Mm-hmm.
So people should point at you and say, that guy or gal does X, and they should know how to describe you to a kindergartner.
Mm-hmm.
And if people can't do that, like if people look at your LinkedIn profile, I'm like, it's unclear what this person does, you've already lost. And so look at your own profile, look at your own brand, and is it easy to figure out what you do, who you help, and what you help them do? If you can't do that, then you should go back to the drawing board.
The key messaging. Well, Justin, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Raul. I appreciate it, man.